For 19 years, until her retirement in 2022, Carol Lors Iman was the programming and marketing librarian here at the Nashville Public Library. Now she serves as the membership chair of the Friends of the Library and occasionally facilitates book groups for RISE, the Rivier University Institute for Senior Education. Laura Knoy hosted a daily news and public affairs call-in show at New Hampshire Public Radio called The Exchange for 25 years. I was an avid listener and always found the topics interesting and was impressed by Laura's insightful questions. 5 years ago, Laura left and started her own communications business. She also launched her own podcast called Read Local New Hampshire, well, NH, I should say, which I bet many of you would be interested in listening to. In the podcast, she focuses on New Hampshire authors and independent bookstores like our own Ballin Books. In addition, during these last few years, she wrote the novel we're going to hear about today, The Shopkeeper of Alsace. And I never say it right. How'd I do? Okay, well, they'll fix it. They'll correct me. During Laura's entire journalism career, she had a reminder on a Post-it note hanging in her desk that said, "It's about people and their stories." If you read the book, you know she took that to heart. She's here today to talk about the people in her book and their story. I'm ready to listen, and I hope you are too.
Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is say, can you hear me? So, can you hear me now? That's better? Oh, thank you. Okay, Laura, I have a confession to make. Back in the 1990s, there was a period of time where I hardly ever listened to the radio. But I had a good excuse because on 3 separate occasions, my car was broken into and they stole my radio. And so on third time, I just kept forgetting I'm not replacing it. And I went for a few years without a radio until I bought a new car. But that was a point at which I realized what I was missing. There was this new talk show on NHPR, and they covered local topics, and they were interesting, and they went in depth, and the host never talked over the guests. And you could hear from like any presidential candidate, almost any presidential candidate that came through the state. So, of course, that host was you, Laura, and after all these years, it's just a thrill to be able to meet you in person this past year.
Thank you, Carol. And here's a couple people I want to thank. Sure, before we get started. First of all, the National Library and the Friends of the National Library and Ballin Books. All 3 of you have just been amazing and so organized. I mean, National is on it. So it's really impressive. I also want to thank my family. I have 3 cousins here from Indiana, Tim and Beth and Mitch, which is pretty cool. And my sister PJ is here. She's been to 2 book events already. I told her she didn't have to come to Group 1, but she came. And then my beleaguered husband, who's been to I don't know how many book events, and heard of Foot Call Widows. Well, he was a novel widower for many years, so I especially want to thank him. Oh, and one more person, Cynthia Neal, who also writes historical fiction and was on my podcast, Be Local NH. Cynthia's book, Catherine, is about an Iroquois woman and her role in the American Revolution, which, I know Ken Murray's been working on that thing, but Cynthia was on it before Ken was, so I'm going to thank Cynthia for giving us a spell.
Oh, great. So what we'll do this afternoon is, first I'm going to ask you some questions about the book, The Shopkeeper of Alsace, your first novel, a very intriguing novel. And then I'm going to ask you some questions about what you've been doing since you was at HPR, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience.
Great.
Well, first question, to begin with, why don't you tell us the story of how you came to write The Shopkeeper of Alsace?
Right, and I love that. I love that question. And by the way, just so I know, I don't want to know any spoilers. How many people have not read the book yet? Okay, Ballin, we're going to sell a lot of books today. That's awesome. So I'll keep my remarks careful, but I encourage you when you read the book to read the story behind the story, because that's where it tells how I accessed this story. When I was a college student in the 1980s, I studied in Alsace, France, in Strasbourg, which is a beautiful city right on the Rhine River, so close that I could ride my bike to Germany. I wish I had my maps with me. I didn't bring them. But if you can picture France, the eastern border of France is Alsace of the Rhine River. So I studied there because I spoke mainly French, but I also spoke a little German. So I chose to go there instead of Paris. While I was there, they set us up for a weekend in the country. And because Strasbourg was a big city, so they wanted to show us something different. So I got paired with a woman, Annette, for the weekend. And I was in my 20s, she was in her 50s, but we really bonded. She was going through a bad divorce at the time. Her adult children were, had already left the house, and she really needed a friend. And we just connected, and we remained friends for 35 years until she died in 2015. So why am I telling you this? Annette was 8 years old when the war broke out, and her family had to leave very, very quickly. Again, Alsace is right on the border. So when someone says the Germans are coming, you don't have time to make a cup of coffee. You have to go. So that was an experience that shaped her and that I started learning about over the years, being her friend. And I always thought, okay, that would be a great article or a book, or I should do something with that story. And then she died in 2015. And so I thought, well, I guess I blew that opportunity. But it turned out I didn't, because we could talk more. There were cassette tapes. So I always say my journalism spidey sense went, woo, cassette tapes. So I can talk more about that. But Annette, my friend, was a little girl when the war broke out. And this is her family's story.
Well, I'm sure that your background in journalism also apparently helped you in your research and so forth. Why did you decide to write Sarah's story as fiction instead of nonfiction?
Right, and I get that a lot. In fact, so Sarah is the heroine of the story. She's the matriarch of the family. She was Annette's mother. And even Sarah's own grandchildren have asked me that same question, why nonfiction? First of all, I worked in nonfiction my whole career, and I really wanted to write fiction because I love fiction. But more importantly, there wasn't enough. There wasn't enough to go on. Sarah would write in great detail about what happened, in 1915. She was murdered. She was a teenage girl during World War I. So there'd be great detail, and then there'd be nothing for 4 years. Or they would write about an incident, but they wouldn't say how people felt, what people said, how different people in the room reacted differently. So there wasn't enough there for nonfiction. I did write an article for New Hampshire Magazine and for a French magazine about it, but it was just an article. The other thing, though, is even if there were enough, I think historical fiction is a very powerful tool, because I think a lot of you in this room, if I asked you, would you like to read a history of Alsace during World War II? You'd be like, but if I said, do you want to read an awesome story about a, hard expression, badass woman who always managed to stay one step ahead of the bad guys, and you had kids, and you had an adorable husband, you had a business, and she went all over France trying to stay safe, you're going to read that story. So I think historical fiction gives us an opening to learn about history in a way that is more engaging. Humans teach us storytellers, right? Cave people, we sat around the fire and told stories. And so I think that for so many reasons I made it fiction. So.
Great. I just find it amazing that there was any records left over after all the running they did.
Yes, that's a really good point. Yeah. I'm surprised there, because I usually bring a beat up baggy map to show on me
Braces they went. I didn't bring it because it's so baggy that it's a little embarrassing. But in the book, at the bottom of the book, there is a map that shows you all the places they ran, here. So, yeah.
I also want to mention that if you go to lauraKnoy.com, there are photographs of Sarah and her husband Malak.
Yeah.
I think Cherie's kids. Her, yep. So
that's a big, gets good thing to look at. So the NADA follows the many moves that Sarah and her family had to make, and sometimes it was for safety, sometimes it was economic. But from 1915 to 1945, I counted 10 different locations where they settled down, if you could call it settling, from Holland to Alsace between France and Germany, and also to central and southern France. And so on the first page of your book, Sarah says, Polish Jews like us were pawns, sometimes courted for political and material support, other times scapegoated and targeted as traitors. So can you talk a little bit about the treatment of Polish Jews during this time?
Yeah, I would love to, and I'm so glad you asked that question. And I've done probably 25 books of it at this point, and no one has asked me that. So thank you, because the book, it's the Shopkeeper of Alsace. It takes place largely in, as you said, Alsace, but also southern France, which you'll learn about when you read it. But you're right, the first 3 chapters take place in Poland, because Sarah was a teenage girl in Poland when World War I broke out. And that experience really shaped her and gave her the skills and knowledge and intuition, because she's deeply intuitive, almost in sort of a weird superpower way. She's deeply intuitive about how to keep her family safe. But I didn't know anything about Poland during World War I when I started this. And those 3 Polish chapters just about killed me. And I thought, like, should I take them out? What should I do? I don't know. In the end, I kept them because I do feel like they're so important to her shaping as a human being and what gave her all that strength and resolve. Poland was, some of you may know this if you're smart about history, so Poland wasn't Poland during World War I. It was part of the Russian Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Prussian Empire. And think back to your World War I history, there's all these, empires that got busted up after World War I. So I wish I had a map, because I'm using my hands, and you really have no idea, so ethnic minorities, Poles, but also Ukrainians and other religious and ethnic minorities, all these 3 great powers are like, come to our side, like be on our side. And so in terms of Jews, the Russians suspected that the Polish Jews were more in sync with Germany, which is very weird for us now, because we think about Germany in World War II. But at the time, Russia was seen by many Polish Jews, not all, but you can't talk about people monolithic, right? I mean, people talk about Americans, blah, blah, blah. There's 100 different opinions. But there was a large, strong contingent of Polish Jews who favored the German cause because the Germans were seen as just better. The Russians were, in many instances, including in Sarah's own family, terrible to Polish Jews. One of the early memories that Sarah talks about in her letters to her children, and what a gift to have like this woman's direct words, like those are her words, not mine. One of the lines that really made me feel like this would be a great novel is the soldiers arrived with empty sacks and left with them full. And like once every 2 weeks, these Russian soldiers would come into their shop with empty sacks. Thank you very much. Boom, 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 boom. Take all this stuff. Maybe beat somebody up at the same time. So Poland was really a battleground. And all these great powers were what wanted control. They wanted to know who was going to get Poland. Because right now, when World War I broke out, they were all sharing. I could talk about this forever, but I'll stop.
Unless somebody has another question. But yeah, your answer is very interesting to me because that kind of explains, if you've read the book, there was 1 or 2 instances where German soldiers were actually sympathetic characters, which is weird. Paper.
Me too. Me too. Well, before, yeah, I did not know that. Yeah, right.
Yeah. I looked it up, and before World War II, the population of Jews in Poland was 3.3 million, and then after the war, it was like survivors were like 300,000 or 400,000. It was really crazy.
Can I just add something there? Yeah. I asked Jacques, who's one of Sarah's descendants, when I interviewed him. I said, have you ever
been to Poland, you know, because that's where his family was from. He said, why would I go there? It's a cemetery for me. So yeah, it was, yeah, Polish Jews did not fare well. But after World War I, you know, Poland is decimated. So after World War I, many Eastern Europeans, not just Jews, but many young Eastern Europeans came to France because it was the land of opportunity. And France welcomed immigrants because their factories, their fields, their farms, their mines, everything just been decimated in World War I in France. So France was like, yes, immigrants, please come. Please help us rebuild our country. Yeah, you know.
So just an aside, I really like a novel that has titles to the chapters because it helps me find things. And so in this book, each chapter title has, first of all, the location where they are, and then the days where that they're there, and then one word that gives you a hint of what happens in that chapter. So I just want to give some examples. So chapter 3, April 1920, arrival, Metz, France. Chapter 4, February 1923, love, Metz, France. Chapter 5, in February 1923, passion, Metz, France. So, because that's right. Okay, let's see where I'm at. Oh, so the family member, as you said, the family member that you met in person when you're studying France was Annette, right? It's the daughter of the main character, Sarah, and Annette is a big part of the story. And you remained friendly with her for another 30 years until she passed away. And you also became friendly with Brigitte, who was Annette's own daughter.
Right, and her 2 sons.
Yeah, and your steps, hey. And how did they describe Sarah? And also, did Brigitte ever meet her grandmother? Did they overlap?
Yes. Sarah lived a long time. In fact, she really helped raise those children.
Right.
And the first time I asked Jean-Michel, Sarah's grandchildren, I said, so we were out, you know, having tarte flambée, which is an Alsatian specialty, and wine. And so I say at this bar, I said, so Jean-Michel, just tell me about your grandmother. I was just starting the process. And he started crying. And he's not that kind of guy. She had a huge heart, just people in her house all the time. In fact, sometimes when I think, oh, do I really need to have company? Sarah had people all the time, sleeping on the couch, sleeping on the floor, family coming in from Poland.
Yeah.
Huge heart, always giving people money. Here's where you go for French lessons. Here's where your kids sign up for school. So big heart, very generous. Terrible cook. The grandchildren always say, and they loved her so much they couldn't say anything. Plus at that era, you couldn't say anything, right, to your grandparents. But they were like, we never wanted to eat at Manny's house. It was so bad. And a lot of the novels you read about France, and I read novels about France all the time. In fact, I just read Bob, which I won't say the title, it's a great novel, but it's like, they made the sauce, and they washed the lettuce, and then they picked the fresh herbs, and there's like 3 pages of how they made this meal. Sarah she was an Eastern European, you know, she's a Polish Jew who arrived, who moved in like 20 different, 20 is an exaggeration. She lived in like 15 different places. She didn't have time to like make the sauce or make the fresh herbs.
Right.
So she was a terrible cook. She also said exactly what she thought, sometimes kindly and sometimes unkindly. That very sort of direct, from the old country thing. So I've gotten some great stories from as I'm a kid, but they loved her. And when their parents were busy or distracted, you know, she helped raise those grandkids. She was wonderful.
So did she spend the rest of her life in France?
Yeah.
So in your afterword, you mentioned that there's some key elements in the story that various family members remember differently. Can you give us an example?
Yes, well, and I'm so glad you asked that, because one of the other answers I think to why did you make it fiction instead of nonfiction is we've learned now that memory is not a reliable partner, right? From criminal justice, you know, all these people in the front row would witness a crime and the police would bring them in, and all these people in the front row might say it was that guy or that girl. We don't remember things. So there's a key
incident in the book that I don't want to give away, but it's a very, was one of the key lines that got me started with this story. And all three surviving children remember it slightly differently. And, you know, and then I reached out to a cousin of the family who was in Australia. I thought, well, maybe he'll, you know, and he had remembered it differently. And so, in the end, I had to decide, okay, I have to make that up. Like, which version do I choose? Which version is real? So, it's funny, isn't it? Like, we remember things differently. It's kind of humbling, isn't it? Yeah.
So when Sarah and Mac and Sarah's husband's name is Olak, but there is a point where he changes it. It's changed to Max. So if I say Max, I mean Olak, Sarah's husband. So when they arrive in Colmar in France, they feel welcome there. They spend an afternoon with the rabbi getting advice about settling into the town. But then after that conversation, Sarah told us that her husband, for the most part, attended synagogue without her. So I was curious, do you think that Sarah lost her faith after some of the things she went through? Or do you think she always identified as maybe culturally and ethnically Jewish, but not religiously?
That's so interesting because I did the book club with two synagogues in Manchester. We did an online book club last week, and the rabbi asked me that question. So I felt very pressured to get it right. My sense is, and this is where it's fiction, but my sense is from reading her letters and talking to her children and her surviving children and grandchildren, that she never felt religiously Jewish, but she felt very strongly culturally Jewish. And that her husband actually was more of both, and his father actually worked in Colmar to help settle the huge waves of Eastern European Jews who were coming in. So on her husband's side, they were quite religious and culturally Jewish. On Sarah's side, my impression is that she was much, much less. She was very much, early pioneer of women's rights, if I could call her that, and in Poland and in Colmar at that era, women and children had to sit up on the balcony. If you look at some pictures of old synagogues, so they're, and often behind sort of lattice work or bars. Well, here's Sarah, and you're really smart, you have amazing intuition, you run the family, you run the store, you're not afraid of anything. But for Shabbat, you have to go upstairs and sit behind bars. So my sense is she did not take to that very kindly. Yeah. But she was very strongly culturally Jewish, and her husband begins both religiously and culturally. Yeah.
So what's a lesson for today that you hope your readers will take away from the novel?
Oh my God.
I love that question.
Have hope and keep going, because that's what she did.
Yeah.
Thank you. And sign up for my newsletter. My publicist wanted me to say
Yes, go to lauracanoy.com. So in all that research and travel that you did in Europe as you prepared to write the book, how did you react emotionally as you learned about the conditions that the characters were subject to?
Yeah, there was a tear shed, yeah, for sure. But also just so impressive, that she was able to go to all these places. And I love that you counted, Carol, the number of places. Was it 10? Poland?
Yes, so I made this little chart. And I love that, but every is so prepared. It's three Saldi read the books. And so every place is a different color. Yeah, I had them color Pinterest, so Margie had to fish it out for me. But yeah, I think there are 10 different places.
And there's 2 more places that I took out. Oh, when the book went through some heavy editing at the end.
So yeah, so there were a lot of places. But go ahead, what was your question again? I apologize.
The bag.
Oh, my sense when we travel. Oh, yeah. So my husband's here, he remembers, and we'll both get choked up. Later in the book, you meet some very, very good people who helped this family out. And one person in particular, and Steve and I visited where he worked in this little teeny city called Ganges in southern France. And we visited his house. We couldn't go inside, but we visited outside. There's a plaque outside, and the word hero is sort of thrown around so much these days that he really was a hero. And I have a small picture of him posted up on my desk. And so to go to that town where this man, you see me speaking very carefully, I'm not trying to give too much away, but this man really upped out Annette's family. And then to walk those streets and think about my friend being 8 years old and finding refuge in this little town, that was where the tears really started to come. That town is amazing. And I stayed in touch with a researcher who researches that area, and shared the story with him, and he really helped me. He really helped me with that research. Yeah, that was really moving. Just picture 8-year-old Annette walking around and thinking, okay, I'm here now, It was a beautiful moment.
Great. So was there anything you learned in your research that surprised you, like something that doesn't get mentioned in the history books or the novels or the movies that we're familiar with?
I would say there's so much, yes, and I don't want to keep these nice people here till 5 o'clock. So much, but first of all, the whole Polish piece, again, I didn't know anything about Poland during World War I until I started researching this book. So that's something that I hope you enjoy learning about. The other thing is I knew about the Alsatian experience during World War II, but I didn't deeply appreciate the Alsatian experience during World War II. Now, full disclosure, Sarah's family did not stay in Alsace during the war because they were Jews, and when Germany illegally annexed Alsace during the war, they made the Provinz Judenrein, which means no Jews. So Sarah and my family did not spend the duration of World War II in Alsace. So you learn their story through, you see the whole build-up to war, you see them having to hightail it out of there. But in terms of what happened in Alsace, actually during those 5 years annexation, I knew some about that, but I did not know as much as I know now. For example, southern France was called the free zone, right? The Vichy government, the fascist collaborationist government with the Nazis. Northern France was occupied by Nazi Germany, but Alsace was annexed against all the rules of war and everything. Who cares, right? They grabbed it and they said, today you are German. Yesterday you were French, today you were German. Take off the beret, burn all your French books, no more speaking French, no French newspapers, no French stamps, no French literature,
No French pear tarts
no French
or blueberry tarts, if you've read the book.
I don't know about that actually. But nothing, they eradicated everything of the French language and the French culture, and if you more beret and said bonjour, whoosh, you're in big trouble with the local new authorities. So I knew that it was bad in Alsace during the annexation. I didn't realize how bad it was. And the next book is going to take place more like inside Alsace, what happened during those 4.5 years while Sarah's family was largely away. And you learn some of that by reading the book through the experience from a friend of hers, but you're not immersed in it. So.
Yeah, one thing I learned from the book that I never thought about was there are several French people in the book in the south of France, in the Vichy area, who sympathized with the Nazi collaborationists. And after France was invaded in 1940 and they surrendered, these people kept going around saying, well, the war's over now. It's over. Like, what? That long the war ended in the 1940s. That's just something, a point of view that I'd never heard.
Well, that's a great point. And I think one of the things that's interesting about this book from an American perspective is, right, for most Americans, World War II in France is D-Day, maybe the liberation of Paris, and the Battle of the Bulge, right? And that's about as far as Wute did. So this book shows you from September of 1939 through May of 1945. You know, these French people were living it. I mean, the last part of France was liberated in early March, early February 45. So for a long, long time, they're enduring this war, yeah. Even though France capitulated and signed that treaty in June of 1940, they're living under, you know, there's still a war going on. So I think America, from an American perspective, we don't appreciate how long and tiring and awful it was for people. Yeah, thank you for raising that, Carol. That's an important point.
Was there one part of your story that was most difficult to write, like maybe a plot point that was hard to translate into fiction, or you know, something that required a lot of revision? How do you talk about having to do a lot of revisions?
Right, boy. The Polish part was very hard because I know French culture. I speak French. I've been there a bunch of times. You know, I could research in French and English. I had the family. I had Sarah's letters. I had recollections of the surviving children. In Poland, I had Sarah's. She'd written some letters to her children about what her childhood was like in Poland and what it was like during war in Poland. But that really wasn't very long. It was going to be 4 or 5 pages. Yeah. So that was hard. I worked on those Polish chapters forever. And like I said earlier, I thought about chopping them on more than one occasion. So I think that was the hardest part. And then in the end, I felt like they were important to keep. Yeah, that was tricky. I also rewrote the ending about 5 times. Because you want to end it well. And yeah, in the end, I think I like the ending. People have written to me and said that they, you know, shed a few tears. So I think that's good. I think it's good.
Yeah. Is there a piece of the most rewarding feedback you've gotten about the story or any characters?
Oh, so much. 2 things. The reaction has been great. I hope people would like it, but people are really connecting on a much deeper level with this story than I thought. We're living in difficult times, and people say that all over again, but I think people are finding inspiration from this book. You know, that this woman was so brave, and so many good people helped her, and she didn't just fall apart, she just kept going. So people are connecting this with this story on a much deeper level than I expected. So that's been really cool. The other sort of lighter thing is a lot of people at my events have said, my grandfather is from Alsace. My uncle's family came from Alsace. We always thought we were German. You know, so-and-so came from, or my father, the 2 people reached out and said, my father fought in Alsace because Alsace was liberated by the Free French and American forces. They liberated basically the province. In fact, it's a beautiful museum if you ever go there, Colmar. How many people here have been to Alsace? Okay, not a bad number, yeah. A lot of people have come up and said they have family from Alsace. And about half of them say, I thought we were German. And I always say, well, they probably were, because Alsace went back and forth between France and Germany 5 times within a 75-year span. Between 1870 and 1945, Alsace changed hands 4 times. So if you were born in 1870 in Alsace, you were born French. Then in 1871, in the Franco-Prussian War, Germany took Alsace, so you were German. Then in 1918, when France won the province back after World War II, you're French again. Then in 1940, when Germany grabbed Alsace in World War II, you're German again. And then in 1945, when Alsace was liberated, you're French again.
And they think you captured that.
It makes sense. If you're confused about your family's lineage, you're good. Like, it makes sense.
There was a character who described, was that the rabbi?
No, well, the rabbi, I have him being born in like 1868 or something, yes. And also Sarah's friend Adele. I have her born at 8 and she 65, and she experienced the Franco-Prussian War and all that stuff, yeah. there's so many novels. I'm going to be busy for a long time now.
Have me back, Nashua. This is great. Look at all these people.
So let's go on to just some questions about you. Can you tell us what you've been enjoying most about your work since you left NHPR in 2021?
Right. And honestly, the best thing has been finishing this darn book because it took these 7 years.
So you were still working when you started.
Yeah,
I started working at NHPR.
right.
Yeah.
I started researching and writing in 2018. Those first Polish chapters. And then I thought I was done in 2021. And then I started submitting into literary agents and publishers and kept getting rejected. So it took me 7 years to get this book in good enough shape that a real publisher would want to publish it. And Bedazzled Ink, I mean, it's a beautiful cover, right? I mean, they were great. Cynthia and Neil and I both work with Bedazzled. And so I have to say my favorite thing since an HPR has been getting this thing finished and then coming out and talking to people. I mean, it's just so great. It's so great. I love it.
So since 2023, you've hosted your podcast, Read Local NH, where you interview authors. And can you tell us how, when I listened to you talk about how you select new authors, can you just talk about that?
Yeah, it's kind of random, actually. I started Read Local NH, about 3 years ago, because I really feel like there's so many great New Hampshire authors that don't have the big publicists, they don't have the big budgets. A lot of the books that get highlighted are highlighted because they're great books, but a lot of them get highlighted because the author wrote something great 10 years ago, but the latest book isn't that great, but they're a famous author, So I really felt like there's so many great authors in New Hampshire that I want to help celebrate them. So the first year I was like, anybody out there log on? The second year I've partnered with New Hampshire Writers Project, and we picked the authors who won the NHWP Literary Awards. So that was very prescribed. The third year, it was kind of a mix of like who I was reading, who I was meeting at events and author conferences. So it's kind of a mix of people approaching me and me finding people. And then this last year, I partnered with NHWP again. And so we had like a submissions contest almost. And so NHWP would invite people to submit, and then they would pick the top 3 people, and then I would pick from the top 3, which was nice because at that point I was getting so many people who wanted to be on. I just couldn't read everything. So, and that's how Cynthia was on the podcast last year, because Per Fiction was the best one of submitted. So we picked her. So it's kind of random. I shouldn't admit that, but
Well, I just like what you said about how, there's hundreds of thousands of books published every year. And so it's so easy for a good book to just get lost in the shuffle.
it is. And I'm so glad you raised that, because I really encourage you to check the podcast out. You don't have to download some funky app if you want to do that. You can just go to my website. It's there. There's like a tab that says podcast. You'll see it. So you don't have to, do all that. But there's so many great authors. I'll say to my husband, I'm like, this is a great book. And there's so many good authors in New Hampshire, and they don't get celebrated. Yeah, they should be. So
I just want to recommend, I think it's the most recent episode on the author's Ty Gagney. And he writes about the hiking accidents in the White Mountains. But he's a risk manager. And so he writes from like that standpoint, and he's very analytical, and it's not sensationalist or exploiter. So
is Ty, I don't know if people read Ty Gagney. Here, okay. Once you get sort of Concord North and the White Mountains, I've done a couple events like the week after Ty, and I'll have like 25, 30 people. That's great. I'm happy to talk to people. And then they'll say, oh, Ty was here last week. We had to rent out like the theater down the street. Like, he says wonderful. His books are wonderful.
yeah. I also recommend Joe Boninger.
Yes, Joe Moninger used to teach English at Florida State College. He sadly passed away at age 67, just a couple weeks after his retirement. He wrote 30 novels.
medieval more acclaimed. And we just don't know about that because if for some random reason it doesn't hit the Washington Post or the New York Times. So I'm trying to do my own little part for New Hampshire by celebrating these authors.
So, what's something you know now that you wish you'd known when you started writing?
Oh my gosh. How hard it is to get published. When I started, I thought, wow, I've hosted the leading talk show in New Hampshire. How hard can it be? Oh my gosh, it was so hard. I got rejected so many times. It was so demoralizing and terrible. I wish I had known. You carried on. I persevered. I'm here.
You probably heard that story from so many people you interviewed, but
Right.
you said, "Oh, that's them, not
Yeah, exactly.
that's them, not."
Yeah.
So, can you recommend one or two other books of historical fiction about World War I or World War II that we might want to view?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Gosh, there's so many. One of my favorites, probably, and some of the ones you all probably read, like All the Light We Cannot See. That is a fantastic book. The Women of Chateau Lafayette by Stephanie Dre. One of the things I like about my book is that I link World War I and World War II, right? Because those wars are linked. It's not just a random war and then 20 years later, a random war. And a lot of World War II fiction starts in 1938-39. Mine starts in 1915 and goes all the way to the end of the war. The Women of Chateau Lafayette by Stephanie Dre also does World War I, World War II. It also does the French Revolution as experienced by the Marquis de Lafayette, who everybody here knows helped us to win our own revolution. So I can't say enough about Stephanie Dre and the Women of Chateau Lafayette. Also from the Russian perspective, The Diamond Eye by Kate Quinn is about a female Russian, by a female Russian sniper. And it's heavily based on a true story of some, I think his name is Ludmilla, but I'm not sure. And that reminds us as Americans that, we really depended on the Soviet Union to help us win that war. So that's kind of a cool perspective as well. Yeah.
So is there anything I haven't asked you about the book or about your current work that you like to talk about? I think everyone would like you to couple them more about those upcoming projects or books you wish we on if you can.
Sure, yeah. I always tell people, you've done most of my work, so thank you. Rebuild the lineage, check it out. Please please sign up. But I always tell people, please buy locally, please buy at Damlin Books or Gibson's Books or Toadstool. But the weird, creepy algorithms of Amazon would like you to leave a review. So it's not me asking for that. So please leave a review on Amazon. Please buy locally. I guess I would like people to just read widely, read local, and books make great gifts, so buy love books.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we'll go on to the question portion of our program now. So if you have a question, just stand where you are. Please stand up because you'll project better. And you have a question?
Hi, Laura.
Hi.
I wanted to see. I'm curious if you were concerned at all about Holocaust fatigue, and if yes or no, why?
So the question was if you're concerned about Holocaust fatigue and why.
Yeah, and that gets to my long, sad story about how hard it was to get Trigger's published. Because I did run into, there's a lot of World War II out there already. Okay, but what am I supposed to do? Like, I'm not going to take my manuscript and put it in the lit stove, right? So I did encounter a lot of that. Oh, there's so many of these stories already. I would argue that my story is different. It's actually not a Holocaust story. It's a World War I, World War II story. Also, my story takes place in Alsace, not Paris, where most French World War II fiction takes place. But I did run into a lot of that, and that was the problem. Bedazzled, the publisher, on the other hand, said, this is exactly the kind of story that you need right now, and you want to publish this thing. So, but it layered the process when the book got better and better. The first 45 rejections I got, I deserved because it wasn't good enough. But the last 15 or 20, I really did deserve. That's good. That's good. And I did gone into that for a lot of literary agents, especially. They were like, "This is a great story. You can clearly write, but there's so much World War II on there already." So extra thank you to Bedazzle for picking that up. Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Other questions? Yeah.
Hi,
Mike, so you mentioned when you were doing the research that you had actually read direct letters from Sarah to the children. In your reading of the letters, did enough of her voice come through that you were able to pick up upon that and then let her voice flow fluidly into your description of her?
Okay, so the question is that in reading Sarah's letters, did her voice come through enough for you to use it in the book?
I think so. I didn't have a lot, but I think I did have enough. But also talking to her surviving children and grandchildren kind of filled in those spaces. So after I worked at HBR for 25 years, but I worked at NPR and other outlets for about, 6 or 7 years before that. So I'm kind of good at listening to what people are saying, but also listening to what people are not saying, because what is, I don't know, 80% of our dialogue is not what we say, it's what we don't say, it's our alienation, it's the words we choose and don't choose. So I feel like I started to get a sense of that, but then talking to her surviving children and grandchildren, they had stories about Mammy, they called her, grandma, and I feel like I got enough. And I love that question because every single event I do, I get a couple questions that I haven't been asked before, and no one has asked me that, so thank you.
Other questions? Yes.
Has your book had any effect on the people around you and the local community and the local economy?
The question is, has your book had any effect on the people around you and for your local audiences?
Yeah. New Hampshire has been great. And even though being bungalow in New Hampshire did not help me get an agent or a publisher, it has made the book probably more of a bestseller than it might be on its own. Yeah. But you have to take what you have and run with it, right? The book's been selling really well. Allen Books Focus that's selling really well. Gibson's has run out a couple times, and I've had to, I've given them some emergency books. Every single library I've spoken to has said that there's a long waiting list, and so I started recently donating a book to the libraries because I know your tight budgets and you can't just buy 10 more books even though you might want to. So I will have a signed copy for you guys here at the National Library. So it's been good for bookstores. Gibson's Books and Ballin Books and other local Toadstool, they've been pretty happy with this book. It's selling well, which is great. The other smaller local impact is a friend of mine put me in touch with a local wine shop. Copper has a local wine shop called Wine on Main. And they can't, it's hard to compete with the state liquor store in New Hampshire, right? But Wine on Main has figured out they have memberships, they have events, they just sort of special nights. So this friend put me in touch with Wine on Main, suggesting maybe have a book and wine night. And the owner of Wine on Main emailed me and said, "I'm so glad to be connected with you because for the past 3 weeks, everyone's been coming in wanting to buy Alsatian wine, and I couldn't figure out where it was coming from." So, yeah, so it's a little local impact there, yeah.
There's a question over here. Barbara? I was just wondering if you talked about a nice book. What do you want to do?
Can you talk about the next book you're working on?
Yeah, I'll try and make it short because I see a bunch of other questions. But when war was declared in September of 1939, cities and towns right along the Rhine River, not protected by the National Line. Do you guys know what the National Line is? A series of cement bunkers and so forth that supposedly would protect France, but instead the Germans just went around it, like, oops. But there was a Strasbourg, Vic City, and all these little towns right on the Rhine River were not considered protected. So France came up with an excellent plan to ship these people who were considered vulnerable
down to southern France, southwestern France. So every community had a host city. So Strasbourg, where I lived, was connected with a city called Périgueux. Strasbourg is a very sophisticated, beautiful, ancient, medieval city. The people there, were well off, well educated, had lived these beautiful homes and so forth. Périgueux was, southern France was depopulated. People didn't have indoor plumbing, people had dirt floors, people didn't have indoor cooking, they had to cook outside on these weird chimneys. So the Alsatians arrive to this host community that's supposed to house them during the war. This is before France capitulated. And the Alsatians are like, this is the other side of the moon. And that's a direct quote from stories that I've read. This is the other side of the moon. And we have to sleep in a barn and there's no plumbing. I read it to a chicken on the way to it's just, they're sophisticated people. The southern France people are like, who are these people? They come from this place that they've never been, and they're suspect because Alsace went back and forth in France and Germany many times. So are they spies? Who are they? And they eat weird food, and worst of all, they speak this weird dialect, Alsatian. Now, a lot of the people in Alsace spoke French and Alsatian, but especially the older people, they don't even speak French, they speak Alsatian. So your husband or your brother or your uncle is off fighting the Germans, and now you have to care for, clothe, house, and feed someone who speaks what sounds like German. So there's a lot of, who are these people? But very quickly, they figure it out. They become close friends. They fall in love. Some people get married. There's so many stories. To this day, there are celebrations of that friendship between Strasbourg and Périgueux. And so I would like to write a romance novel about that. So I'll have it back. It's like, what makes a great romance novel? Like, who's he? Who's she? Right? These people are just, they're ruse, right? They're hicks. And who are these people? They speak a funny language and, they're snobs. So, does that sound good? Okay. Thank you for that validation.
Bob, did you have a question?
Yes, how did you vector into your publisher? You said you got 1 million rejections.
So the question is, how did you venture into your particular publisher?
Yeah. Well, Cynthia's here. Raise your hand, Cynthia. So, Read Local NH, which we talked about, Cynthia's book was chosen as the fiction selection by the NHWP last year. And so she writes historical fiction about the Native American experience, but earlier about the Irish experience. And she got the red there, so you know where that comes from. So after the show, Cynthia is saying, how's it going? And I was like, it's not going very well. So I was getting nice rejections at that point. This was late in the process. I was getting, you're a good writer, it's a good story, but there's too much World War II out there. So Cynthia said, no. So she wrote to Bedazzled, which said at that point, we have enough manuscripts, we can't take anymore. And she said, no, you have, if you know her, she's very insistent. She said, you have to look at this. So obviously she didn't say you have to take this because they're the publisher, but she said, you have to look at this. So they said, okay. And they looked at it and they loved it and voila. Oh. I know, it's a great story, isn't it?
Festival.
Oh, that's story.
Yeah. So we have time for one more question. I see somebody in the back there.
The question I was going to ask is, how do you represent the agony and despair of picking up your life and leaving it, especially in minute detail, without minimizing it, especially because it happens so many times?
Yeah, can you ask that again? That's a great sort of multi-layered question.
It's your question, not question. But yeah, how did you represent the agony and despair of picking up your life and leaving, especially in minute detail, without minimizing it?
So the question is, how do you talk about the agony and despair being uprooted without minimizing what the people were going through?
Right. So you would make a really good editor. But that's a rich question. I guess my less rich answer would be, partly I had first source material. The family, the survivor children and grandchildren, their stories, the letters of Sarah. but partly I also did a lot of first person. I watched videos, I read first person accounts. My husband can attest, I had like books this thick that we dragged back in our tiny suitcases from France. One of my zippers broke because it was so heavy. So I tried to capture the anguish that you talk about, but also the resilience. And I wasn't really channeling it from my own experience, but after 7 years of conversations and first-person research, I felt like I was able to channel some of that. I hope I did. I'm going to think more about that question because there's a lot in there, and you don't want to minimize it, but you also don't want to do, Holocaust fatigue that you talked about. And it is an uplifting story. Without giving too much away, it's uplifting. So I hope that does justice to your question. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, yeah.